Chapter 2, Schism.
For 6 hours, Michael Devon and Forrest 7 had been staring into each other's eyes, while cracked factory windows framed the sun's descent. Private Campbell said, "Guys, snap out of it. Sergeant White's team could be anywhere." Crouching in the shadows on the catwalk, Private Campbell heard every leaf of the whispering trees and every cricket in the distant grass. This forsaken industrial park was a graveyard of hiding places for the enemy, all foliage and discarded machines. Campbell's rapt attention had become pure paranoia. Those crickets were boots crunching in the dirt. The breeze in the trees, enemy whispers. "Why is your little staring contest more important than the training exercise?" Campbell asked. The veterans ignored him. He crept back and forth between all positions to make up for their slack. A .50 caliber bullet stood upright on a crate between Michael and Forrest, and they sat on 2 more crates with their hands on their knees, watching each other. The game was to grab the bullet first. So far, neither man had even twitched. White's team should be here by now. Was he waiting for nightfall? It would be soon. Campbell became mesmerized by their game. He leaned against the rail, watching Michael and Forrest. He nervously pulled an oily lace from a discarded boot. The setting sun cast deranged shadows on their faces through the window. They were a closed circuit containing the flow of their energy, while he worried and wondered. It was like some spirit had possessed his teammates. Why had it chosen them? He resented these thoughts, and he resented these men. So he grabbed the bullet off the table. That broke the circuit. The closed loop of their attention transformed into a pincer that immediately closed on him. But their expressions hadn't changed. He felt a chill in his soul at the 4 alien eyes looking coldly at him from behind all that camouflage makeup. He hadn't really ended their game. They were still playing. Campbell picked up that oily bootlace. He tied one end of the lace to the bullet, and the other end to his own pocket knife. Then he hurled the bound items over the railing of the catwalk and into the open air of the factory. The setting sun's sickly light glinted off the metal of the 2 weights as they twirled and wrapped around a thin metal beam. They dangled there like a junk robot's testicles. Campbell turned back to his teammates. "Game over, boys. It's a draw." The 2 men stood. Michael was taller and leaner than Forrest, and in need of a haircut. He said, "No, the game just changed, and now you are part of it." Forrest spoke next. His voice was deeper, and his eyes were meaner. He wore a beard and a crew cut. "You're gonna get that bullet back, and then one of us is gonna get it from you." Private Campbell failed to adopt a stern voice. "Or we could get back to the actual mission before Sergeant White and his clown car of toy soldiers surrounds us because you 2 can't keep your eyes off each other." Forrest said, "White's team is 2 miles away at the wrong set of buildings, on the wrong side of the river." Michael explained further, "I switched out his maps before we left camp. Sergeant White is fucked. We won before we even started, and that gives us all night to play with you, Private Campbell." "Does Lieutenant Thomas know about this?" Campbell asked, sitting down with forced nonchalance to rummage rations from his pack. But the 2 rivals worked together to pull him back to his feet. Forrest said, "Private, you're going out there to retrieve that bullet, or else we'll throw you down into that pile of rusty metal." "You'd be court-martialed," Campbell said. "Let's play a different game." "It's all the same game," Michael said, with a twinkle in his eye. His grin was almost charming. "And this game isn't over until the end of time." Forrest was not charming, with arms crossed and eyes glaring from within the viper pit of his bearded face. "You think we're worried about a dishonorable discharge? We've been talking about cutting loose from the army and all its rules anyways. We want the frontiers, the violent edge of things. Mercenaries, terrorists. I always wanted to be famous for dueling, like Alexander Hamilton, or maybe just do a killing spree and go out in a blaze of glory, starting with you." They had been herding Campbell like an obedient prisoner toward the place where the beam met the catwalk. He tried to rush past them, but they caught him and placed him before the beam. There was no escape. He was in the presence of death, embodied by these 2 soldiers he'd provoked. The fear disappeared from his voice. "You 2 lunatics should just kill each other. Nothing else will ever satisfy." "That's why I'm talking about duels," Forrest reminded him. "Now get out there and get that bullet, Private." Campbell put on his gloves and climbed over the feeble railing which bent under his weight and almost sent him tumbling into the darkness below. The fall would break bones, but the abandoned machinery and tangled metal, rusty dangers obscured by shadow, would surely eviscerate him. This game had real stakes. He told his persecutors, a duel would be a waste. All your training spent in one little skirmish? You each need an army, an empire. You need to give each other a year to plan. A new expression passed over both men's faces. They shone like two moons. They wanted each other, but not just for one night. For life.
Soon Campbell was moving hand over hand across the expanse of the factory.
The thin beam held for now, but shook with each movement. The further he progressed, the more it creaked and crackled. His heart beat in his throat. The dangling bullet drew near, swinging mildly back and forth like some kind of lure. Forrest walked around the catwalk to the other side of the beam. Then Forrest climbed out and moved hand over hand toward Campbell. He wore no gloves. Campbell looked over his shoulder and saw Michael approaching from the opposite direction. The beam shook under their progress. Could it hold all three? Campbell reached the bullet. The beam sagged, not just straight down, but a little to the left. It crackled. Dust flakes fluttered and twirled. Campbell grabbed the string as both men reached him. "Give me that bullet," Michael said from one side. "Give it to me, Campbell," Forrest commanded from the other. Instead, he let it drop. He didn't even watch it fall into the darkness. "Fuck off," he said. "Both of you. We could all die out here." "That's fine," Michael said, reasonably. "But we want you to know something. We talked about it and we like your idea. We each need an army or an empire for a real duel. So we made a decision." "When did you even have time to discuss that?" Campbell asked. "Just listen," Forrest gently instructed. Michael continued. "Forrest and I are going to have a fight to the death." He made it sound like a wedding announcement. "We're giving each other a year to plan, and that year starts today. And that's the only rule," Forrest added. "After that year, anything goes.
Any weapon, any tactic, any location, any civilian casualties.
Fully unleashed." Michael said,
"There are no more frontiers, so we're creating one."
"And it was your idea. We appreciate that." "Congratulations," Campbell said. Michael and Forrest unsheathed their combat knives. "But we have to seal it in blood," Forrest said. "We're going AWOL. No more safety net. We need to cross a line from which we can never return. You will be that line." Campbell stammered. "I have other ideas too, better ideas. Just wait." Sweat streamed down his brow. He looked again at the rusty death below and couldn't bring himself to let go. During that moment of indecision, the two knives penetrated him below the ribs, all the way to the hilts. It felt like the worst indigestion ever. He watched in horror as they sliced across his belly and almost met in the middle. Blood gushed from the massive wound, and his guts crawled out like worms after rain. Campbell gasped for breath and laughed when he realized he was still holding the beam. Why was he holding on? So he could bleed to death up here instead of down there? But he was going into shock and losing motor control. His grip slipped before his consciousness. Gravity pulled him into the darkness, where unseen jagged metal ripped him apart, and his hot blood mixed with ancient oils. He couldn't see his surroundings, so dark down here. But he could just discern his two killers hanging far above him. Their insane journey had just begun, and his sane journey was now at its final end. He supposed the training exercise was over.